So what are design sprints? So very, very briefly, the design sprint is a 5-day process for 3 to 7 people to solve big problems and test new ideas. And basically what it means is you go from an idea to a tested prototype in 5 days. I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what does that even mean to build to prototype a product and test it in 5 days. On the first day, you choose a goal by interviewing a lot of experts and mapping out the problems and thinking about where you want to be in 2 years, and also kind of by thinking about what are the assumptions that you're trying to test. On Tuesday, you generate as many ideas as possible, and there's a structured process for that. Wednesday, you start converging on all of your ideas around a single kind of approach. Thursday is a full day of prototyping, so you're creating a super realistic prototype. And Friday, you test it with users. So actual 5 users come in, or remotely, you actually interview them with a prototype that feels real. So this is the key of the whole idea. If you've created a prototype that feels real, that actually tests your assumptions, and that can fail. It's very important that it could fail, because if you know what the assumptions you're testing, and you know that the prototype is actually testing those assumptions, you have to accept that maybe the answer is no. It's not, your assumptions are wrong, right? This is what it actually looks like, right? So it's a little bit more complicated than that. I simplified things, and I definitely skipped some things, but this is what our week looks like. Why should you care about design sprints? So I guess the easiest answer would be like, hey, look at all these famous companies that are now running design sprints or run design sprints in critical points in their process. You probably recognize at least a few of those. You can look at all the big consulting agencies that are now offering or integrating design sprints into their process. Right, but maybe more interesting would be to see what clients actually say about this, right? So this is Ev Williams from Medium and Twitter. He ran a design sprint with Medium with the creator of the design sprint, Jake Knapp. And he said if you want to build better products faster, basically use this process. This is the chair of General Electric, basically saying, every business leader I know really cares about, really is asking themselves, are we moving fast enough? And design sprints introduce speed and urgency while still keeping up quality. And this is Prudential. It's a big insurance company in the US. We had our doubts, but the process quickly proved its worth. Everyone with a streamlined and efficient process. But maybe more interesting is what do product designers say, right? So this is Eric Rice, the author of The Lean Startup. So if you've heard of The Lean Startup, if you know about Lean, this is a pretty strong endorsement. Within 5 days, you'll move from idea to prototype to decision, saving you and your team countless hours and countless dollars. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how Lean and design sprints really complement each other. In a way, it's even leaner than Lean, right? And this is a designer from Adrian Smart saying, I really like the removal of busy work. When going into a project, I really like the clarity of knowing that I will accomplish what I'm looking for. I will achieve the goal. And this is me. So basically, sprints don't make just great product, they make great memories, right? They're really fun, they're really engaging. It's almost like an adventure. I think that's a big piece. And I think a skipped one, this is actually, if you're a designer, this is a good one. The ability to clearly align with the client while charging for the value of my work rather than the hours. So a lot of people, by being a lot more efficient, you can start, not charging hourly, and you can start charging for the value of this week, which is you're going to do a whole prototype for the product, which is pretty remarkable. But I'll talk about the old way of doing things, right? So there are 2 options, generally speaking, for a design process. One was designed by committee, right? It's like a committee of people, and they need to come to some sort of agreement on what we're building, and there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of compromise, and usually the product is not so good. That's why design by committee is kind of, has a terrible reputation. And the other option is the lone genius scenario, right? Like it's someone sitting in some sort of, maybe in the shower or maybe in, their own office and coming up with genius ideas, right? And then kind of forcing it on the company, and that's a way to kind of get a good design. But I think it's cool to it's interesting to notice there's a missing option there, right? There's never a really good process for being creative together as a group, right? So for solving problems as a group. And I think Israelis are better at this than some other countries. Like we like to argue. And so when you get a lot of Israelis in the room, everybody has their own opinion, but then you argue it out, and in the end, someone wins, and sometimes that's the better idea. And we're not very hierarchical, so it sort of works. I think one of the reasons Israeli startups, why Israel is such a big startup country, is we like to argue and we're not afraid of it. But that's still not the best way. Right? There still could be a better way to argue and come to good conclusions, better than just like who's the better arguer, right? Or who's like more persistent. So that's part of what the design sprint does. So I want to talk a little bit about how it all started. So let's go through the history, right? So if you know a little bit of startup history, right? In 2001, this Agile Software Development with Scrum book came out, revolutionized the way people thought about developing software. And there's a lot of great stuff in this book, but I would basically say, because I'm sure a lot of you probably know it already, maybe the core assumption is you don't want to build software for months and months and months without releasing it to users, right? Because as soon as it comes in contact with users, all of your assumptions are out the window, and something new could emerge. So build for 2 weeks, release, see what the reaction is. Build for another 2 weeks, release, see what the reaction is, right? Quick releases and quick adaptation. So it's about learning through building. So you create a backlog of things you want to build, you divide them into smaller chunks, and every 30 days or 14 days you release them, and then every day you actually meet together to see how you're doing and kind of coordinate. So basically this is how it started, and it took over the world of software. Basically, nowhere in the valley, nowhere in big software companies is anybody developing software that's meant for public consumption without something like this process. Then the lean startup came, and that's 2011, that's 10 years later. And basically, what Eric Rice did was take some of the insights from Agile and brought them to the world of product design and your business, like how to develop and build the right business, right? And so it's all about, testing your assumption in the marketplace. So you can describe it as build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn, right? And so you build a minimal amount, right? You build a minimal viable product. You release it, you see how people react to it, you learn, and then you change course a little bit, and you build again kind of the next version. So, great process. Again, completely changed the way startups are, being run and managed today. Basically what he's saying is some of your assumptions are dead wrong, and what you should do is build a minimal viable product and test it. And so this is the way we used to do things before design sprint. It's very important that building is still a big part of this, right? You actually had to build a product and then measure and learn. So the way we used to do it is we used to interview people, collect a lot of user stories, collect hundreds of user stories, start ranking them with users, figuring out what the features are inside, deleting everything that didn't seem like the top priority, then doing some paper sketches, doing some wireframes, prototyping it so that it's kind of applicable, Then generally speaking, because I was working with a client, I would send it to the client, and then I would basically pray that they knew what to do with it, right? And I came to feel like the system was biased against success, for a couple of reasons. But here's a couple of things. Like designers know this, and we really wish everyone else knew, right? Product designers. Research isn't optional, right? You can't design a successful product without talking to users. You just can't. You should always be testing. Whenever you have a design, doesn't matter if it's pretty, doesn't matter if it's ready, you should always show it to someone and get the reaction, because you learn so much. You can never wait for perfection. Nothing is ever perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Show it as early as you can. And this is a big one, especially in Israel. And I want all the Israelis in the room to pay attention to this. The loudest voice is not necessarily the smartest voice, right? And so if you don't have a process for people with good ideas to actually win out, then your process is flawed, right? And the Israeli system, while it's more effective than some sort of repressed, never arguing system, it's still terrible for the voices that are not, for the shy voices, for the people who don't feel confident in, their sketching abilities, for instance. So there has to be a system in place to counteract that. And here's what actually happens in my experience with users in the old way of doing things. Just enormous pressure to start coding, right? Until you code or build something, it's not real. Everyone's ego leads to just enormous sort of neglect. So either it's the entrepreneur who's absolutely sure that they're doing the right thing, or it's the designer who's absolutely sure that their design doesn't need any testing, it's ready for production because, he's a big deal. Ego leads to neglect, and it's wasting so much money. Then you're sending it to the client, or you're sending, the manager is supposed to give the okay and provide feedback. But they don't know, they're not talking to customers, right? So how are they going to provide feedback on whether it's good or not? And then this is what usually happens. Months of development, followed by disappointment when nobody gets the product or nobody's using it, right? Just months and months of development followed by nothing. And just abysmally low rates of success, right? So most startups, if you work at an agency and you start noticing the pattern is you come to the agency, you give them a lot of money, you develop for 3 months, maybe 4 months, you run out of money, and your product never goes anywhere. Why? Because you can't build a successful product in 3 months, and especially now when after 3 months is the first time you're going to show it to customers, right? It's not possible. If you show it every day, maybe in 3 months you can build something good. And I always tell people what they should do, but at some point, it's not helping me feel better that I told them to do it and then they didn't do it and then they failed, right? I had, this is a true story. I had a customer come to me and say, this is my life savings. I saved all of my life for this point. He was a middle-aged man. I'm scared to death, right? I'm scared to death of this. Please help me make it a success. And then I told him, okay, that's great. You should test our designs constantly. And he didn't do it, and he's failing, right? And just think about how it makes me feel, because I was involved in that. I said the right things, but there wasn't the right offering or the right kind of process for this to actually happen, right? So then came the design sprint, right? So the design sprint, it started in Google. So this is Jake Knapp. I actually got to meet him a couple weeks ago in San Francisco for breakfast. He's the sweetest guy. He's super, super nice. He's also super tall. He was a product designer at Google, at Gmail. He also worked on Google Hangouts and a couple of other projects. And one day, he flew, I'm trying to remember what country, it was some European country, I think, to work with the team for Google Hangouts, which was in a different country. And because he was coming from San Francisco, they cleared out a whole week for him. So there was a whole week with no meetings, where just him and a team of developers sitting together. And he came back from that week saying, "Oh, that was the best week of my life. Like that was the best in terms of work. It's the most productive. We got the most done. We validated things." And that's what started him thinking, what would the ideal design week look like if we didn't have meetings, if we didn't have distractions? How can I make a perfect week for design? And he was very smart, so he was able to look at design thinking exercises and kind of really pick the best ones and find exactly the right recipe and try to create the perfect week. And then, he was pretty charismatic apparently, because he started selling other teams at Google on running this. And after a while, there's over 100 teams and companies that ran this. And then he got snatched by Google Ventures, joined their team, and started running design sprints with all of their portfolio companies, right? So this is basically now standard Google Ventures process to run a design sprint with a company when they have a big problem to solve, when they're trying to validate a big idea. And so you can see, a lot of very big companies. Slack is one of them. Uber, Medium, Blue Bottle Coffee. If you don't know them, you'll know them soon. They're going to take over Starbucks soon. They're huge in the States now. And then they started sharing it. So Jake started sharing it on Medium. You can see from between 2012 and 2014, there's a lot of these blog posts where he's starting to outline the process. And I like to say, well, some of my posts have more claps than that. So it wasn't that big during the blogging era. And then in 2016, the book came out and became a bestseller. And is really now making the way. So this is very, very recent. 2016 is when it started, going crazy. And basically, if you think back on the model for Lean, right? You used to have to build, launch. You had an idea. You had to build it. You had to launch it. Then you learn, and then you kind of build it again. And basically, what the process allows you to do is go from idea to learning as quickly as possible within 5 days. And you don't have to write a single line of code. That's part of the magic. So before diving in, is any questions at this point? No. Okay, good. So the key features of the design sprint. So I say established and respected is a feature. I think it's the most important feature, because when you work with someone who thinks they're very sure in what they want to build, when you come in and say, hey, this is a process that all of these great companies are running, they're more likely to give up control for 5 days and actually listen to customers and listen to people, because it kind of encourages discovery. It's a short, dedicated time, which means a lot. It requires a discovery mindset, right? So you can come in with, you can have your own conclusions and ideas, that's great, but the exercises have their own logic. So the exercises are going to be, we're going to interview everybody, we're going to interview experts, we're going to interview users, right? We're going to look at what the competition is doing. We're going to look at how other people solve similar problems. So it puts you in a discovery mindset. It's so important. We use time boxing, so I actually had this before the lecture. This is a time timer. Basically to show you kind of how much time you have. This is super helpful when you want to force a group of people to limit themselves to 30 minutes for an exercise. It's very helpful that everybody can see how much time they have. Includes research, inspiration, and validation exercises, right? 100% focused attention. So we actually have a rule. If you have to take a call or you have to do something else, you have to leave the room. So you still could do it, but don't pretend that you're here if you're not going to be here. And then a big principle here is together alone, which is, you can see this is a picture from one of these exercises, just me in the corner. we each work on our own ideas. We're actually playing nice music in the background, and everybody's working on their own ideas, and then we come together. The reason is the best thinking is done alone. The thinking and creating something new is best done alone, and then you kind of converge together. And also, we don't talk abstractly about ideas. Whenever we have a discussion, we have to have something tangible to show. This is what I mean. Because if you have some experience in the design process, it's so common to have people arguing for a very long time in words, and then when you draw something, they both, oh yeah, that's good, that's perfect. So it's like the meaning that they were ascribing to the words was so important to them that they weren't seeing that they actually agree on the actual solution. And then bias towards action, we keep moving, right? Like, we keep moving, we have to lock in decisions, we have to keep going. And there's so much value to it because on the last day, guess what? We're gonna test our ideas, and if they don't work, we're gonna find out. So it's only 5 days, we have to keep moving. And it's super simple. What you need is not expensive, it's not hard. The most expensive thing you need for a design sprint is the room. Like, you need to have a room that's yours that is dedicated because we're gonna stick a lot of stuff on the walls and it's gonna stay there for a week. Yeah, I could go through, so any questions so far before I go? I keep going to the actual week and kind of start breaking it down. But yeah. Yes, great question. So generally in the room, you want your biggest experts in different fields of expertise. So usually what we say, we bring in 2 people. Usually it would be me on the product side and kind of facilitating the process, and then another prototyper who's a graphic designer usually, who can prototype very quickly. Then the group has, let's say, up to 5 spaces, sometimes more. We could go over 7 if we need to. Where they can bring in their head of marketing, their head of sales, who's in contact with a lot of people. We can bring in clients, especially if we feel like we don't have a lot of expertise, we can bring in specific clients. I just had a sprint in California where we actually had 3 clients in the room as experts sitting for the whole week.